This is our new Hitachi SU3900. It's a tungsten variable pressure SEM. So I'll just kind of point some things out. This is your secondary electron detector. This is your Oxford EDS detector, so that's for your elemental analysis. This is a new detector for you guys. It's a UVD, ultraviolet detector. So what that does, it allows us to get a secondary electron image in the low pressure, variable pressure mode. Okay. So that's what that is. It's our gun, our source up here. Our backscatter detector is fixed. So if we need to remove it, it's done right here. Usually we're going to leave that in. We have a movable objective aperture with 4 different holes, 1 being the largest and 4 being the smallest hole. There's a navigation camera. Oh, go ahead, we have a question. She asked about the UVD detector for the low pressure. So low pressure works for samples that are insulating, non-conductive. Yes, if you had a sample that had some moisture in it, you want to start in variable pressure mode because the vacuum's not going to be able to pump down, right? It's going to be outgassing. So, so yes.
That's for biological.
Biological, but also ceramic, plastic. Also, you can put in, you know, rubber samples. This UVD also, you can use it in the high vacuum mode because it detects catholuminescence. So certain materials put off photons when they interact with the electrons. So this will detect that as well. It'll act like a catholuminescent detector in the high vacuum mode. So, so down below we've got one roughing pump, low vacuum pump, and then there's a turbo pump is our high vacuum pump. And then there's an air compressor you may hear kick on. That's to run the pneumatic valving. Okay. Do we have a separate pump for the column? So when we're pumping out, it's all one chamber. So the chamber's pumped out, the gun is pumped out. When we're in variable pressure mode, the valves change. So then the gun stays at high vacuum, and then we use a needle valve to regulate how much vacuum we're letting into the chamber. So they are separated, yes. What kind of vacuum levels we're talking about in the gun is 1 times 10 to the minus 3 torr, yes, yeah. So this only has a low vacuum gauge. Even though the vacuum is better than that, it'll only read with a Prani gauge. There is a port here if you want to put on a ionization gauge or a penning gauge. There's a port if you want to measure a higher vacuum. So, so at this point, so right now everything's shut down. So that's up to you if you want to leave it shut down when you're not using it. Always leave it pumped down under vacuum. It will hold its vacuum even when it's not running. I can't open this door up. The nice part about this machine with the turbo pump, within 5 minutes of turning on the key, it's ready to use. Okay, we don't have to wait for diffusion pumps to warm up. So basically, by the time the computer boots up, the microscope's ready to use. Okay, so normally you come in, if the lights are on, you see it running, it's ready to use. If you come in, it's shut off. It's like starting your car. Okay, we come over to the key, we turn it to on, to start. It's spring loaded just like your car. You hear the pumps turn on, you hear some valves changing. So we've got these different colored lights here. So when things are blinking, they're changing state, okay, or things are pumping down or they're venting. When it's solid, that means it's at that state. So if the evac is solid blue, it's at high vacuum. If the air is blinking, it's venting the chamber to atmosphere. When it's solid, that means it's at atmosphere. Nope, right now it's pumping down. So evac is blinking. If air was blinking, then it would be venting. Okay. And then when we have our beam on, this would be lit up down here when we turn our high voltage on. Okay. So right now it's pumping down, the turbo's spinning up. The computer and SEM, you can operate independently of each other. So let's say you need to take some images that you forgot, that you saved on the computer. You don't need to turn this on if the computer's not on. So down here, you can actually move this forward. The button here is to turn on the power to the computer. So there's one computer to run the SEM and the EDS. So there's the software is on that one computer to run both of those. If the monitors are off, the button, the power for the monitor, they're just little touch. It's not actually a button, it's just a touch. So it's nice having the dual monitors because we'll have the software for the SEM and then also the EDS open at the same time. So we're letting it, the software right now is just a generic user. So in that case, you probably need like USB to pull your images off and spectrum off. So, you know, the images are just JPEG or TIFF images. So I don't know if you heard, but it just beeped. So that was letting us know the turbo spun up to speed, the system's ready to use. So that didn't even, I don't even know if that even took 5 minutes. So, and you see now the light is solid, okay? So now we're gonna open up the software. It's called PCSEM is the name of the software that runs the microscope, okay? So we're just going to click on that. So this has another login. So right now the default login is just SU3900, the name of the instrument, no password. If you want to add users to this, you can. So the benefit of that is you can set it up any way you like. If you make changes, it only affects you. So you come in, someone messes your stuff up, you would know, right? So each person can have their own login. That way you set it up the way you like. Someone changes it, it doesn't affect you. So the different conditions, your accelerating voltage may be used different. Your spot size, it might be different. How you like the buttons, you know, you can kind of customize that stuff. So if everyone's pretty comfortable with the SEM, then you could just get by with one login. But unlimited, yeah. So, but to add logins, you need to log in as SU3900, and then you can add more logins. If you logged in as Zach, he can't add more logins, only through the SU39. And you can delete through that as well. So, correct, yeah. There's no password now, that's up to you if you want to add one. All right, so we're going to hit start. And so the computer is now going to be talking to the microscope, talking over an Ethernet connection. For whatever reason, if it doesn't establish communication, restart the computer. That fixes, right? First step of troubleshooting, just reboot the computer.
So usually we need to turn the system on and then
right.
Then the computer
exactly. So it's the software opened up. Now we're talking to the microscope. Okay. So this window popped up because it's asking me, hey, the last sample that was in here, do you want to pick up where you left off? Okay. I don't know what's in here, so I'm going to say no. Okay, I don't know what's in there. We're going to say no because we're going to be loading a new sample anyways. So it's assuming, the software is assuming that you want to load a new sample. That's the first step. Okay. So I'm going to start in this upper corner and we're kind of go over these menus here. So we have a filament indicator. So this shows us, now we have an idea of how much life is left in our filament. So it's going to, as the filament wears down, this is going to change colors. When it gets to red, probably time to change a new filament. So it's actually measuring the resistance in that wire as it thins out, which is nice because in the past we wouldn't know. It just blow probably the worst time. So now we have an indication of how much life is left in our tungsten filament. Okay.
And you said it's 10,000 hours?
The question is how many hours on a filament? Usually about 100 hours per filament. And you have 20 filaments. So that should last quite a while. And I will show the, after this training, kind of like the person who's going to be taking care of this, how to change a filament. Okay. It's very simple on this. I will get to that later, but yeah. Start and stop, pretty self-explanatory. Start turns on the beam, stop turns it off. We're going to start with exchange specimen because that's what we want to do. We're going to load a specimen first. So we're going to hit this and it's going to walk us through how to exchange a sample. So the first thing it did, it already started venting. Okay, as soon as you click that, it's going to start venting the chamber. So we can hear that happening. So these little stars are going to count down as it's venting. Okay. It pumps down fairly quickly, about 2 minutes. It takes about 3 minutes to vent the chamber. Okay. But in the meantime, we can start telling the software what sample we're loading. So if we accidentally hit specimen exchange and we didn't want to, you could hit cancel. If you are just removing the sample, there's one already in there, you can hit remove, but we're going to go to exchange specimen. This is the size. This is the stub size that we're telling the software. Okay. So you have lots of different sizes here. Whatever one I select, this is the actual size of it. So if I'm not sure, I can hold this up here to verify. So this one is 102 millimeters. So let's say you have a sample and it's bigger than this plate. Okay, it's hanging over the edge. Just go to another size that you always want to go to the next size bigger to err on the side of caution. So always measure bigger. So if there's not a size here and you're in between, say 127 and 150, go to 153. Okay, that's our size. So of course the 203 is not going to fit on here. 127 is as big as it'll be displayed, but you kind of know. So just for the training, I'm just going to load this. This is a resolution standard. So this is gold on carbon. So this is your sample. It came with the. So this is just gold particles evaporated on carbon. We use that because it has good contrast, and gold particles are very small, evaporated. So we're going to pick our size. So we know this is 15. Then we hit next. Now this is where we measure So there's a scale on both sides of this. So this is easier to put on this side, and then you can hold it up. And now we're measuring. So always measure the highest point of your sample. So if you have different topography, always pick the highest point, okay? So we heard the beep. That's telling us it's at atmosphere, okay? These are adjustable. So we can loosen this screw here, and then I can screw this up and down to adjust my height. And inside, there's a toolbox here that have different size threaded. So if you have a really tall sample, you can put in a shorter. And then you set the height, and then you just snug this down to lock it into place.
So the maximum height that we can go is there?
75. Yeah, from all the way down here. So it's actually higher than 75 because this is 0. So you can put in a very tall sample.
Oftentimes we'll be doing flat, mostly flat samples. So should we go for a taller one or a smaller one?
I would like to have the most range. So the question was, should we go for a tall sample or short? I would always try and aim for the lower part because then I can lower my sample down. So the lower I drop my sample, the bigger field of view I have, I can zoom out more. A lot of times people like to zoom out and see their whole sample. So if my sample's really up close, short working distance, I can't zoom out that much. This microscope, because we're using an optical image as a map, it's not as big a deal because we can see that with the optical camera. So, but good question, yes. I always like to have a longer working distance, so a shorter is better, yes. Okay, so this is now where we set our height. So I'm right at 0. If you don't worry super accurate right now because we can fine tune it later once we put the sample in the SEM. Okay, so to set the height, I can grab this and go up and down, or you can click. And, it'll step it 0.5 millimeter at a time. Okay.
So that 0 is
It corresponds to this 0.
I know, but is it the top of the sample that is?
Top of the sample, right here. So they're showing us the highest point of our sample is what we're measuring. Okay. So now we're going to hit next, and now it's telling us to pull out the stage. So you can grab on both sides here, and it'll pull out on rails. So there's micro switches so it knows when the door's shut and when it's open all the way. So you need to open it all the way until it stops to engage that micro switch. Because the next step we're doing is it's going to bring the stage up to its highest point, but it won't do that unless that micro switch is engaged. So it is pretty foolproof. So we can't shut the door and raise the sample and accidentally run into something. So I had a question, how do we attach our specimen stub onto the base? So you can see here, this is a threaded 3 millimeter base, and then each stub is threaded as well. So we just screw it on.
And the stubs are standard.
These are standard Hitachi stubs. You used the pin type in the past, so they do sell adapters where you can, that way it'd screw on and then it would have holes to drop those in. So they do sell adapters. You may have one. We'll look for it later.
So it's also for those bigger ones that we can also screw them to the same place. So.
Yes. So you'll notice there's a flat edge on here with a dovetail. Okay. So this is what slides on to the base of the stage. So the flat edge is going to be pushed onto the flat edge here on the stage. Okay. So I'll show you. So the two flat edges You just push it on until it's flush with that. So I have seen where people have put it on like this and loaded it. Don't do that. Okay? Because what happens when it rotates, it'll bump into this sensor. So when you load it, okay, so it'll sit in there flush and 90 degrees. So before we close the door, now we're going to set the height. So we come back over to the software and hit stage motion. So if I didn't have the door open all the way, see how that now it's grayed out. It won't let me do that. So I need to have the door open. So it is very intuitive. It's not going to let you do something it doesn't want you to do. So.
It's an intelligent system. It's good.
So it's basically telling us stay clear while it's raising up. Don't stick your hand in there, fingers in there. You can see the sample rising up. So right now we're setting the max height. So in that earlier step when we were telling it our height, if we didn't get it set just right, we can now fix that here. So there's also another height gauge when we load our sample. So as long as our sample it fits beneath this height gauge, you can go ahead and shut the door. If it's going to hit it, we pull the door back open, and then we hit down in the software here, okay? Or up, so we can adjust it up or down, but we need to pull the door open. So I'm going to slowly.
I have one question. Where is the detector?
All the detectors are, so the question was, where are the detectors? The detectors are what we're worried about hitting. We don't want to hit any of them. They're all above this height here. So that's why we're setting our max height. We can't go any higher. Okay?
And also that should stop the sample from going inside.
Correct.
Because that's going to hit the thing and then.
Yeah, so if your sample hits the height gauge, you're going to damage your sample.
Right, but not instrument.
Yeah, we're more worried about the detectors and instruments. So when you shut the door, just if you close it slowly, you'll see. You guys can come look. You see, as long as it passes underneath, it's not going to go any higher. All the detectors are above that. If we were too close, and I'm like, you know what, I want to be safe, just go down. Okay, and it'll adjust, and then you can check it again. But so it recommends to be about 1 millimeter below that height gauge. We are there. We go ahead and shut the door. Now we can hit next. So this menu is now asking us what vacuum mode do we want to start in. So if we had a question earlier, what if we had a wet sample? You would want to start in the variable pressure mode, okay? Because it's going to take too long to pump out. And then that's harder on the pumps having a wet sample. Or if we know we're putting in a plastic sample, ceramic, we can start in variable pressure mode. We're going to start in high vacuum mode. And then if you start in variable pressure, you can tell it what vacuum level to start at. And then we can tell it what stage position do we want to start as well. So right now our sample's up at 5 millimeters. That's very good for high resolution work. But if we want a bigger field of view, then we would need to drop our sample down. If we're doing analysis, EDS, 10 millimeters is our analysis position. So no matter what you're doing for imaging, you want to do your EDS work at 10 millimeters. That's the optimal takeoff angle for the EDS detector. Okay? So we could tell it right now to just go to that 10 while it's pumping down. It'll drive the stage there.
So for the VP mode, you mentioned that we can adjust the pressure ourselves. What is the normal pressure that we're expected to have for ceramic or polymeric materials?
So the rule of thumb, you want the best vacuum to dissipate the charging. So always start at a lower number, which is a better vacuum, and then you, in live time, we'll watch the screen to see the charging dissipate. The more gas that we let in, the more that interacts with the beam, and that's going to cause skirting of the beam, distortion. So we still want the best vacuum. So rule of thumb, I usually start around 20 Pascal.
Okay.
And then usually that's good enough to dissipate most charging.
Okay.
20 to 50 Pascal is a good range. Okay, so good question.
So for the wet samples, like Sahat mentioned,
Yeah.
would that not, when it's pumping down, would that not have an effect on the turbo pump?
So what's nice, the question was a wet sample, would that have an effect on the turbo pump? When we do variable pressure, the turbo won't be pumping on the chamber at all. It would just be the roughing, which is a wet pump already, so it's good at pumping out wet samples. So that is another reason to start in the variable pressure mode. All right, so I'm going to start at the Z10, or you could put in a custom range as well, from 5 to 85. So if you wanted to start with your sample all the way down, you could start at the longest 85.
Are you going to use the EDS right now? Is that the reason you put that 10 or?
Right now, I'm just going to talk about the Hitachi software.
Okay.
But yes, I'm setting it there. So when we get to the EDS, it'll be in the correct position.
Okay.
Yes. So right now, you heard the vacuum pump. It's pumping out the chamber. And then that's driving our sample underneath the optical camera. So this is now taking a picture, a colored image, so that we can use that as a map.
Mm-hmm.
That the sample looking from the top?
From the top view, yes. So what's nice as well, let's say you had a big sample, it actually would take 4 pictures and then stitch it together. So it'd rotate, it would do this, so they would all be in one picture. So it does compensate for a larger sample as well. So if this image looks okay to us, we just hit okay. If it's too dark or too bright, you can hit recapture and then adjust the brightness and the aperture of that camera. Okay. So now it's asking us to align. So this is another reason why we tell it the proper size, because now it's going to align. So the red circle is our 15 millimeters for this size sample. So you can grab if it wasn't aligned, you can grab the entire, and then you could actually resize it as well. Okay? So you just want to make it on the outside of your stub, whatever stub we picked earlier when we were loading our sample. We hit OK. Now we have a map here of our image. Okay. So now it's asking us before we even start saving. We can get to this later, but it's asking us what file name do we want to give it, what folder we want to save in. So we're kind of setting this stuff up now so we don't have to do it later. Because we're waiting for this to pump down anyways, even though it's the light's blinking blue. When that goes solid blue, then that means we're at high vacuum. So we can set our capture speeds, our image size. So we can get up, if you're doing you want to make a poster, blow something up, you want to do a higher resolution. And then our speed is our, how many seconds is our scan, our capture time. So 32 seconds is right now. We have the option to give it a new file name every time we save, or you can give it a file name and then do auto increment. So that's nice. We don't, it'll just 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't have to keep putting in a name every time. This is where we'd select our file format, bitmap, TIFF, or JPEG. Embed the data display into the image. I recommend having that selected. Our data display is what's down here, right? If we don't have that selected,
We don't know that.
there is a text file that's saved with every image as well that will have the conditions, so you could apply them later. But for easy reference, so we know what mag, kV, vacuum, it will all show up here. And now if you want, you can actually add different users when you save it. Okay, that's not going to show up anywhere, but it'll show up in a database if you want to search for things later on, right? So then you can give descriptions, different keywords, so then it makes it easier to search for that later on. 2 years from now, you want to, did I look at this? You can search by keyword or user, but it's just like anything, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Is what you put in there, then you make it easier to search or not. So you don't have to use it, but you can. It's there if you want it. Okay, so evac light is solid. This start is now solid. Before it was not. So we can't turn on the beam until we're at high vacuum or variable pressure is selected.